Hi there. In this video, we are going to learn about the permissions in S3. In other words, we are going to learn about access control lists and bucket policies. We have studied so far that by default, all Amazon S3 resources such as buckets, objects are private. That is, only the resource owner and AWS account that created it can access that resource. We also know that in order to open the object in a browser, we had to make it public explicitly. By making it public, we basically granted access permission to others by writing an access policy. Now, before we get started, you need to remember that both access control list and bucket policy are basically resource-based policies. We have learned about the resource-based policies in the IAM section. That means you attach this policy to the resource, that is bucket in our case, not the user of the resource. So what is an access control list then? It enables you to manage access to buckets and objects. Each bucket and object has an access control list attached to it as a sub-resource. It also defines which AWS accounts or groups are granted access and what type of access. When a user or application requests an access to a resource, S3 first checks the corresponding access control list to verify that the requester has the necessary access permissions. Whereas a bucket policy grants other AWS accounts or IAM users access permissions for the bucket and the objects in it. You need to note that the object permissions apply only to the objects that the bucket owner creates. Let's see access control list in detail. Access control lists are primarily used to grant basic read-write permissions to other AWS accounts. Note that only specific permissions are granted using the access control list, that is read, write, read ACP, that is view permissions, write ACP, that is write permissions, and full control. The object access control list is the only way to manage access to the objects that are not owned by the bucket owner. We saw this when we tried to access the objects via a web browser. When the access control list was not configured, we received access denied exception. With access control lists, you grant write permissions to the Amazon S3 log delivery group to write access log objects to your bucket. We also saw this during the video on server access logging. Now let us see the bucket policy in details. With bucket policy, you specify who has access to that particular bucket. You should use bucket policy when you want to manage cross-account permissions for all Amazon S3 permissions. This is different than the account access given by the access control list. With bucket policy, you can pretty much grant all operations on the S3 bucket. Finally, you can generate the bucket policy like any other IAM policy using the policy generator. Now let us take a look at both access control list and bucket policy in the AWS console. In the AWS console, go to your bucket. Now click anywhere on the row except the bucket name. Under the permissions, you will see that there is no bucket policy attached to the bucket and there is only one grantee, that is the current account or the owner of the bucket. Now click on the bucket name, go to permissions. This screen shows you the access control list current configuration. This is the current account's canonical user ID. By default, it has both read and write access on the bucket as well as all the objects in it. Using this option, you can add the access to another AWS account. So you click on Add Account button, enter the canonical ID of the other user, and allow read-write access to the bucket and objects according to your need. With this option, you basically can make the bucket and the objects publicly accessible. We did this during the setup of our static website. This option is required when you can basically dump the log files such as server access log files in this bucket. More on this in a separate video on the server access logging and object level logging. Now let us go to the bucket policy option. Just like any IAM resource-based policy, you can create your own bucket policy and paste it here. Or you can create one using the policy generator option. First, let's select the type of policy, which is the S3 bucket policy. You can choose whether you want to allow or deny the permissions. Let's keep it allow. Principal is the user or application or role to which you want to allow the access. If you wish to give permissions to everyone or you want to make it public, just put an asterisk here. The AWS service should be Amazon S3. Select which actions are allowed. So click here. We'll select delete object, get object, and put object. Here, you need to put the Amazon resource name or ARN of the bucket to which you are giving the access. So let us go back to our bucket and copy its ARN. Paste it here. Now, as it mentioned here, ARN should follow the following format, which includes a bucket name followed by a / and then a key name. Since we are giving this access to all the objects in this bucket, I'm going to put / and a star or asterisk. Click Add Statement and generate the policy. This policy will now allow these actions on your bucket for all the principals, that is an anonymous access, or it will make the bucket public. Copy this policy. Go to the bucket, permissions, bucket policy, and paste it here. Click Save, and there you go. As it mentions that this bucket has a public access now. This is because the principal that we have included is an asterisk. If you wish to give an access to a particular principal, for example an EC2, you need to copy that EC2's ARN and paste it here. In this video, we learned about access control list and bucket policies. We learned that both are resource-based policies. Access control list is primarily used to grant basic read-write permissions to other AWS account. In bucket policy, you specify who has access to that particular bucket, and you should use bucket policy when you want to manage cross-account permissions for all S3 permissions. I hope you understood the concepts of access control list and bucket policy in this video. Try playing around with different settings and create your own bucket policy. It will definitely help you during your exams. Thank you for watching this video.